and welcome to the Philosophical Midwifery stream. This is the Awakening Philosophy. This is the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed, and today we're doing a Philosophical Midwifery stream. Hooray! Because it's Friday, where I'm filming.
Wow.
Where I'm recording. It's Friday when I am recording, so let's make it a Philosophical Midwifery stream. This is the title. We are in the first chapter, How It All Began. If you are following along with this channel, we are reading at the time of the recording, the Phaedo. We have seen the significance of the dialectic many different ways. How important it is, how crucial Socrates is making it out to be, how it might be essential for our purpose, for our virtues, to live in a good way, to be able to discover the most important things: justice, beauty, the meaning of life, justice itself, beauty itself, how it's important for our reincarnation, how the dialectic is important for our way of thinking, an archetype for understanding itself, how the dialectic is needed for an art. So we've seen a lot about the dialectic, especially recently in our reading of the Phaedo. This stream is how that dialectic, how what Socrates is calling the true exercise of philosophy, how the dialectic, which is normally used for ideas in philosophy, to discover the nature of beauty itself, to discover the nature of justice itself, to discover the nature of the soul, and also to experience beauty itself, to experience the soul self by self, out of our physical senses, to experience, thumbs up, the realm of being. The dialectic is our exercise, our training, our education, and doing it at all times makes the virtues and not the vices. So, central, key. The dialectic is normally applied to things in being. This is, of course, what makes philosophy so gosh darn important, but also so unusual for most people, because most people teaching philosophy, most people teaching science, physics, anything at school, are not looking at being. They are not aware that true learning is remembering the things that we have experienced in being, because they haven't read the Phaedo, and instead of seeing the value in what Socrates was doing and organizing our education and society around what Socrates was sharing, they killed him instead. Boo. But fortunately, we have the text that has been translated accurately, that hasn't been around. Of course, the Emperor Justinian, the political powers and the religious powers tried to squash our ability, humans' ability to read and learn for themselves, so they could step in and replace it with faith and belief, believing in what somebody else is telling you. And of course, there doesn't have to be any evidence for that or any reasoning for that, and you can't verify that. You have to do what you're told, or else we will kill you. Barbaric, irrational, unjust behavior that followed in around 529 AD, shutting down the academy, preventing us from reading. You'd be murdered if you had the text, replacing Socrates' works with religious works, and even then in a language that doesn't have the key terms we need. So lots and lots of problems followed Socrates, but thankfully now we have what we need to reawaken philosophy, to pick up where we left off and figure out what it is we need to understand the cause of our problems in society and within our soul, and understand the true nature of reality, the nature of life, the meaning of life, our purpose and destiny. That's the exercise of philosophy. So normally the dialectic is applied to the realm of ideas, giving us a way to go beyond prejudices, faith, belief, scientific belief, to a trust in the logos while we develop understanding, not regular understanding of the physical world, specifically understanding of the realm of being, understanding at a much higher level. And of course, the system of understanding is called the dialectic, applied to the logos. That is the paradigm that we are understanding. And even that, because it's different than any other teacher of philosophy or teacher at school, we have to give it a new term, dianoia. So another word for philosophy, which means philos sophia, the love of wisdom, is philodianoia, the love of dianoia, or the dialectic applied to the logos, which is in being. So the non-physical realm or dimension or vibration of reality, that is the cause of this physical dimension. That's philosophy. That's the only thing that can be an object of dianoia understanding. And of course, as we're reading together in the Phaedo, it's the only thing that can be an object of knowledge, which is why everybody who's trapped with beliefs that keep them tied only to the physical world cannot get understanding dianoia. They only can have beliefs of various different kinds, and they can't get knowledge. So that's philosophy. That which can lead you into what is understandable, objectively, universally, for all time, and also knowable. And of course, with understanding, dianoia, and knowing of being, ousia or nous, there are, of course, stages of development where we integrate that with our learning and our practice. And of course, there are questions. Is there even a cognitive function beyond even the integration of direct knowledge and dianoia? So there's lots of amazing, fascinating puzzles and states of being or enlightenment or states of evolution that we can reach, that we are exploring together on this channel by simply reading. That's all. Just reading the text. It happens to be a text that reflects the logos, so it's one worth reflecting on. And we have a translation where it's not censored or mistranslated due to the problems of past translators. We actually have the Greek, so we can read it properly, so we can find all the delicious puzzles that we can have fun exploring. Hello, welcome to the chat. But there is a question. If everything since Socrates has been a kind of counterattack or a suppression of this, the most important a gift that can be shared with humanity, that reality is understandable and knowable, those two words together gives us a special term, intelligible. So we don't have to fight for whose beliefs are right, whose beliefs are wrong, whose traditions are right, whose personal opinions are right. Don't have to do that anymore. Why? Because understanding is open to all. Good for you in the chat. And knowledge is open for all. It's a friendly, cooperative, helpful, supportive exercise. We are all in this game whether we like it or not, so we can all play together well. This would be moving from the problems of humanity to a harmony within humanity. But it might take a while for the rest of humanity to catch on. Nevertheless, we can do it ourselves as souls. We can move into our birthright, the spiritual and intellectual tradition of Socrates, the golden age of Western culture. We can pick up where we left off and discover the dialectic, our gateway into dianoia, which is our gateway into nous, the dialectic we can apply to our knowledge, to integrate it, and maybe even go beyond. Very, very exciting stuff. And if you're excited about that and you want to develop this for yourself, understand it for yourself, understand understanding, get to the party. If you hear that there's a brilliant party and a banquet happening, it's no good just hearing about it from somebody else and just believing them. You go to the party yourself. There's a saying, you don't send your slave to the banquet in your place. So if you're interested in any of these things, feel free to join the YouTube. You can join the Discord. You can follow along on Twitch. But there are videos on playlists in the YouTube where you can read along with us together, explore along, develop with us. Philosophy is not a one-person game. It's a group game. But it does raise a question. What about all the other things? If dianoia, if trusting the logos, leading to dianoia, true understanding, leading to nous, true knowledge, leading to question mark, higher states of being. If that's rare, if that's not talked about in our society, on TV, by teachers, even teachers of philosophy, most of them, they're not even aware of this because we killed Socrates for telling us about it. And we've only now, in the last 5 to 10 years, had translations of the text where those words are kept. And it's quite hilarious or tragic, depending on what your perspective is, how badly Socrates has been translated up until now, and how important it is to have the key terms, especially if it's a giant puzzle. So, what do we do? How do we make the transition into philosophy? And even when we do make the transition to philosophy, if everyone in our culture, in our family, on television, in our schools, our parents, our pastors, are teaching us reality isn't this, you can't understand reality, you can't experience higher dimensions, there isn't an understandable or intelligibility to reality, there isn't a mind communicating with you providentially at all times, in all ways. If this is just not talked about, the 3 questions that make us rational, where did we come from, where are we going, and what should we be doing while we're here, can't answer them. Says everybody. They are ignored for some weird reason. If that's everything that we've experienced up until discovering this podcast, or this Balboa text of the Phaedo, we have a lot of baggage. A lot of things telling us, don't do this. This is empty talk. This is silly. Surely if you can experience dimensions of reality, then someone should have been talking to us about it at school. Surely if we can understand the nature of goodness and justice, then every single politician should be doing an exam showing they have an accurate understanding of what justice is. Surely if there is a understandability to the spiritual quest of states of mind and enlightenment, then wouldn't there just be one spiritual tradition that everybody learns? The same way, if you want to be a mechanic, there's just one way of understanding an engine. Anyone can be a mechanic. You can be an Indian mechanic, you can be a Pakistani mechanic, you can be a woman mechanic or a man mechanic. It's open to everyone because we recognize there is a true model for how an engine works. We can experience it and we can understand it. If you're saying that there is a true model of reality or the soul or the self that we can experience in this thing called nous, if that's what Socrates is saying, and it's understandable in this thing called the dialectic or dianoia, then why isn't there just one tradition of spirituality that anybody can do and everybody is encouraged to participate in, and every politician and every judge and every school teacher learns it from day one? Surely that would be the case. And because it isn't, there must be something wrong with it. It's not the fault of society at ignoring what Socrates said and the various religious and political forces that came after him that didn't like people thinking for themselves. Surely it's not that. Unless it is. If it is, then we might have baggage or blocks from our cultural upbringing that might prevent us from doing that which is most meaningful. Understanding and experiencing the nature of reality, our self, our soul, the higher dimensions of reality, and finding our purpose. That's the game of philosophy. True philosophy, or philodianoia, love of understanding. There might be things that make it difficult to get into that, to even believe or trust that there is such a thing. You can't go on the activity to discover the truth if you are convinced there is no truth. So that might be a block to beginning. Then once you're in the game, as you start to do the work, you start to achieve understanding, you start to achieve insights. At every level of growth, those blocks stick their head in and say, not you, you can't do it, you're not good enough. Or it's all baloney, Socrates is silly, he didn't know what he's talking about. Or are you saying that beloved mother or father who didn't think this way is dumb? You're a bad child. You are a heathen because my particular religion didn't teach that. Or maybe it's so, maybe it does, maybe there is an intelligibility. There is a knowable reality. You can experience the nature of eternity. You can know everything all at once, to use that phrase. And maybe even that experience of knowledge of eternity is actually understandable, sure. And maybe it's the same paradigm of understanding that manifests in all other intelligible systems, like music, mathematics, the way plants grow, the way the planets move. Sure, maybe they all follow the same intelligible system. But you can't do it because you are not good enough, smart enough, pretty enough. That voice, all of those things, of course, are incorrect, verifiably incorrect. That voice that blocks us from our achievements and our further development towards knowing self, knowing thyself, knowing the self in the highest, most profound way, as well as knowing the reflection of self, mind, reality, consciousness. All of those things that block you from getting there or maintaining that state, these have to be addressed because we're humans. We don't just input the programming and then we're there. We have counterattacks and blocks that prevent us from getting into the game, getting further into the game, acknowledging our success, maintaining our success, developing our success, or sharing our success. This is a human quest. It's not a one-person game. That's why we have this channel and the Discord to share and help. And by sharing and helping, you are perfecting your own being yourself. So, if you're whether you're in the game of philosophy or you're blocked from getting into it, we need to be also figuring out how to understand, address, and remove our blocks, our problems, or to say it another way, that which keeps us chained to our negative or lower states of mind, keeps us tied to our repeating problems. And if there's a repeating problem that isn't for our benefit, that we seem to be stuck in and can't get out of, that's called suffering. How do we escape our suffering or our problems or our blocks? With every step towards your most meaningful or most beautiful goals will trigger some sort of block. And the more meaningful the goal, the more likely to trigger that block. Or the more you want to achieve something with excellence, the more likely it is to surface an aspect of your block. So they are complementary. So in other words, we're led to the conclusion that whatever is this paradigm of understanding, what we're calling the dialectic, that we apply to the realm of ideas in philosophy. Idea is not idea. Idea is a Greek word which means to behold. This is the word that has been tragically mistranslated as forms by past translators of Socrates and taught that way by past experts of philosophy in colleges. It ain't forms. And it ain't idea as in concept. It's a Greek word that sounds like idea in English, but it's idea. It means to behold. So that's the subject of the dialectic in philosophy, the different ways of beholding or aspects of pure being, pure mind, the highest experience of self. And the different aspects of that, or different levels of that, we could call levels of enlightenment or stages of enlightenment. And then if we understand it with the dialectic, we can recognize, oh, that's the Buddhist level, that's the Taoist level, that's the Hindu level. That's a level that we don't even have a spiritual tradition for, because it's a paradigm. It doesn't have to have manifested in a culture yet. Nevertheless, there would be stages that are understandable, just like this is a level of excellence, this is an average engine, this is a Formula One engine, this is a Bugatti engine, I don't know, levels of excellence of engines. So, if that's the dialectic applied to being and the ideas in being, if that's the nature of true philosophy, if that's what we're here to do, and the reasons why we learn together in our read-along of the Phaedo, then what about our blocks? What about our problems? What about everything else in our everyday human life? What about that challenging inner critic? Or, because here's the thing, whatever you learn, you can't simultaneously hold the false belief about that thing. For example, if you wanted to become a mathematician, and you go to school and you think 2 and 2 is 8. I don't know why. Maybe you're when you were little, your elder sister was tricking you and she thought it was funny. Well, when you get to class and you realize 2 plus 2 is 4, you can't at the same time hold on to the belief that 2 and 2 is 8. Yeah, the example I used last time, I think, was sometimes little kids think that cats marry dogs. Dogs are boys and cats are girls, and that's where kittens and puppies come from. Now, if you want to be a vet, you would have to learn something else about how kittens and puppies really are born. You can't simultaneously hold the false belief about cats marrying dogs. You have to sacrifice one. Now, usually it's quite easy to sacrifice that belief about cats marrying dogs because there isn't a high level of significance and meaning within the spiritual training of the family. But if it's a belief about what God is, what reality is, what you are, and if it's a belief that ties together the whole family, and if it's a belief that also fits within the religious mythology of the culture, then there might be a lot more at stake. It could be harder to sacrifice the false belief to learn the truth, even if learning the truth is for your benefit, to become a master vet, a master mechanic, or a master of your own self, a philosopher. Even if this is the kind of learning that leads to your purpose or your destiny and the reason why you're here, there might be a lot at stake. Another problem is you might not even realize you're carrying a false belief about cats marrying dogs. When it's to do with yourself or your soul or reality, you might not realize that you believe this thing about yourself. Another problem is you might never surface it. It might be so good at sacrificing your or pulling you away from getting into philosophy that you never pursue a meaningful enough goal. You may never learn about kittens and puppies. You may never want to become a master vet. So that false belief about cats marrying dogs is never surfaced. So you never know it's there. It stays under the seas, keeping you chained. So it's this class of beliefs we need to bring to the surface, uncover, address in a certain kind of way that can free us from them so we can reach our most meaningful goals. How do we do that? Well, in philosophy, we learn the pattern of understanding that's needed in an art, which benefits, is the dialectic. But normally we don't apply it to our false beliefs or beliefs at all. We apply it to that which is beyond belief, to quote the Phaedo. Unopinable, another quote. So if philosophy is the use of dialectic and the mastery of dialectic applied to the realm of being and its aspects or ideas, what about the other half of the game? Beliefs. When 99% of people are at right now. Maybe, hopefully, that percentage will change the more we awaken philosophy in our own lives. But for now, 99% of people are in the realm of belief. What do we do about that? That's what this series is about. Applying the art of dialectic to the realm of belief, to address what is false, free ourselves from what is false, and allow us the freedom and the freed up energy, focus, motivation, power to reach our most meaningful goals. Therefore, if you're doing philosophy, you need to equally be doing philosophical midwifery. The two go together. You can't have one without the other. You can't be doing philosophical midwifery without also learning the dialectic in philosophy. You can't be learning philosophy without applying it to your beliefs and your blocks to remove them fairly. It's a two-part game. In fact, the dialectic has two parts. In the dialectic, we talk about what an object or an idea is, like what if beauty exists, what if it exists, actually is eternal, universally understandable and knowable because it exists eternally in the realm of being. But also, what if it doesn't? What if it was just a beauty was in the eye of the beholder? Beauty was just an opinion. There is no beauty. You got to do both to understand it. That's the dialectic. So you could say philosophy is side A of the dialectic. What does exist? And philosophical midwifery is its other half. What's not true about being? What's not true about the self? If philosophy is the dialectic applied to being as a way to reaching knowledge of the self, which might even be beyond being, because something's got to be experiencing enlightenment. What's that? Maybe that's the self that the Greeks want to know when they say, know thyself. The axiom they lived by, inscribed above the oracle at Delphi, know thyself. If that's what philosophy is, then to do a dialectic on what the self is, you also have to apply it to what it isn't. What isn't the self? All of that negative, diminishing, blocking, criticism and self-talk and sabotage, the cause of our problems, the false beliefs about the self, is side B. So within this magical dialectic, inherent is the instruction to do philosophy and do midwifery. Apply the dialectic to what is, apply it to what ain't, what's blocking us. That's why they go together. And that's why we're reading the text, because fortunately, somebody went ahead and discovered this. It's the only verifiable, empirically verified, and we have the graphs of the empirical verification in the second part of the book. It's the only empirically verified system of psychotherapy ever. It's the only thing that works. The modern discoveries in psychotherapy that are gaining popularity in the last 20 odd years are all bits and pieces lifted from this. And the past model, Albert Ellis's cognitive behavioral emotive therapy, cognitive emotive behavioral therapy, the kind of psychotherapy that you learn in most colleges now. He met the author of this book and he said, well, this book's the truth. I can't say it because I'll lose my job. So it's an interesting story about that. Nevertheless, doesn't matter for us because we can do it ourselves, and doesn't matter if it's been proven empirically or, the experts have said this is where the game is at. We want to understand why it works and verify it for ourselves in our own experience. That's why we're reading together. The complement to philosophy, and if our job here is to know oneself, then it's the activity we're supposed to be doing, or at least half of it, while also having our nose in the logos, the Phaedo, the words of Socrates. So that's a little introduction. We are in the first chapter of that book. We are reading together, and funnily enough, that chapter is called Where It All Began. So as we read, maybe we will gain more familiarity with how it was that a human being discovered that the same model of dialectic applied to the true spiritual tradition, the true intellectual tradition, can also be applied to the realm of beliefs to free us from our problems. How did he discover that? Well, no need to guess. We can read it for ourselves. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for joining me in chat and on YouTube. Let's jump in and read. Okay, here's where we were last time. Let's go back a bit. I have practiced, so the author, Dr. Pierre Grimes, have practiced midwifery for many years. There are others who've gone through the effort to learn and are practicing this art. It's very challenging because it requires a sensitivity to a new mode of understanding, what we are calling the dialectic. It turns around the most basic ideas and gives them an entirely true meaning. Ideas such as caring, belief, blame, love, knowledge, understanding. The meaning of relationships and the raising of children are each given a new context, which in turn gives a depth of understanding to the human drama. This new context presupposes a new model for understanding, since it is a fundamental shift. So he's describing what's involved, but he's also describing the challenges we face here. Because it can be difficult. He's saying, look, this is what's involved, and therefore, these are the challenges we are all together going to face. We're going to have to change our fundamental understanding of these most important ideas. Fundamental ideas. And we can all recognize, doesn't matter who you are, if you're born into a family, you will have learned your family's model of what it means to raise children, what it means to have a loving relationship, what it means to be loving and caring. So while we fundamentally change our understanding of these sort of things, we are going to be facing challenges. But we are not interested in the insult is called being a dog. Loyalty to anything, even if it's bad, like a dog is loyal to whatever master, even if the master was bad. We want to have a loyalty to truth. maybe part of being loving is telling the truth. Part of being caring is not holding on to what is bad because it's tradition. Actually loving someone might involve questioning our fundamental beliefs about these things to find what is true and beneficial. So we can see how it can be a challenge, but actually finding new understandings for these words might justify why it's actually worth learning new things, learning a new understanding of these words. A new paradigm. Those who have succeeded in reaching this new understanding, it has brought them into a greater mental well-being. So this is what's in store for all of us if we stick to it with courage. And a more profound appreciation of things of the mind. What do you know? Greater likelihood to get into philosophy. We find that this art draws its subjects into things of the mind, to a new model of understanding, and to a more mature kind of relationships with our fellow man. There we go. Is it more mature to seek the truth rather than a dogged loyalty to what is bad, or prejudice, we might say? And while it does this, it also reveals something very significant about the nature of human suffering it addresses. In going through the process, they have learned to recognize the marks of a problem. Good. When you're learning an art, when you're becoming a mechanic, you want to look for evidence that shows that there's something wrong with the carburetor. When it makes this noise, when I turn on the engine and there's that clicking, that's a mark of a problem in the carburetor. I don't know cars, so I'm just throwing these words out. Equally so, we want to recognize marks of a problem so we can address them within our soul and with our friends over coffee. You sit down with Sally and she says, I've got this new boyfriend. This is happening, but then I noticed this. I have learnt to recognize marks of a problem. You don't have to play out that same kind of negative relationship again, Sally. The same kinds of patterns that you've used to playing out your whole life, because we can recognize marks of a problem. We can also, they have learnt why one's normal way of relating conceals its presence. And by the way, Sally, I know why you tend to avoid this subject, or why you have a habit of laughing every time I point to something that is a mark of a problem. It's a way of relating, Sally, that conceals the presence of a problem or its marks, keeping you chained to this kind of terrible relationship you get in. That's a little example. This kind of seeing always brings participants into a search for an explanation of the nature of belief. Wow, that's cool.
Wow.
We just said 99% of people don't ever go beyond the realm of beliefs and opinions created through the physical senses. Trust in the logos, dianoia of the logos, nous of the logos. These are the better cognitive functions, but and the subject of philosophy. But for most of us, we're in the realm of belief. So wouldn't we want to know the nature of this belief that we are kind of in or bound to or stuck in, for the time being at least? They want to discover what keeps these beliefs alive. They want to understand most fully what the process that resolves these problems. Of course, wouldn't you? This kind of learning awakens. There's our channel name. Hooray. It's always fun when the actors in a movie say the title of the movie. Awakens, a deep appreciation for understanding. Awakening Philosophy is the channel, is the name of the channel, okay. Awakens a deep appreciation for understanding because it's through it that one grasps the root of the pathos. That's a funny word. That means Actually, let's look it up, because maybe not everybody knows what pathos is. The sadness, a quality that evokes sadness. But I think here it's to mean misfortune or condition, to undergo or suffer. Right. So as we saw, it's meant in that context. Pathology, the study of suffering or the study of diseases. Right. Sometimes it's used in relation to empathy, the feeling of sadness when you can connect with the problems of another person. But of course, with an art, we don't want to feel similar or sympathize. We want to understand. Like a doctor doesn't have to get cancer to cure cancer. We don't have to feel the sadness that someone in a problem has. So we're not interested in that sympathy kind of pathos. We want to grasp the roots of the suffering or problems or sadness of human existence. From this point on, one can no longer be satisfied with surface explanations of human behavior. Thank goodness. I'm sure we've all seen the terrible implications when people have crappy surface explanations of human behavior. They did that because they're a woman. They did that because they're woke. They did that because they're a Mexican. I don't know. Terrible explanations. We don't want that. Once participants learn this art, they realize how enriching it can make all their relationships and how they experience this kind of understanding in other areas of this life. Wow. With this realization, it is natural for them to have an interest in mastering this art. So the more we get into it, it seems from the accounts of others who've gotten into this art, the more we will awaken a natural interest in mastering this art because of the well-being that we get, because of how it enriches our relationships, because it's an understanding that seems to be universal and therefore can be applied to other areas of our lives. Cool.
Wow.
Right? I teach music and guitar, and once you start to get into the understanding of that, you realize, oh, there seems to be a pattern that reflects the logos. And also, there is a side B, an inverse of that pattern that you can also explore musically. Now, if you're into music, you might, if you look at the circle of fifths, you might recognize that movement in one direction is called the major direction. Movement in the other direction is often called the minor direction. And if you know about modes of music, the more in the left, the more in the fourths direction, the more minor-y you're making your modes or scales. So major and minor could be the positive and negative, the philosophy and midwifery expression in music. I don't know. That's a question. If you're musical, you can play with it. I've seen one lecture online where this idea is touched on briefly in a Jordan Collier, I think his name is, talk. He mentions it briefly, that maybe minor is actually not minor, but the inverse of major. Anyway, fun. Makes music more interesting to see that. The application of philosophical midwifery to the level of personal problems is the result of my own research. Okay, so here is the difference. Personal problems, not ideas. So, whoops. How do I undo? I thought it was undo. Z. Do that, and then I hit this. Yes. Good. Okay, so level of personal problems. Is a result of my own research. Oh, here we go from the chat. I like how the Republic feels like it's talking about me. Oh, yes. I know that. I recognize that feeling. It's almost as if it's talking directly to me. How could that be? Good question. They did that because they're considered, right. The fifth is a spiral that doesn't line up, so it repeats. Oh, interesting. Spiraling up. Spiraling upwards. Very curious. So how does that relate to the Logos, to the Usia, to self-reflection, and to our movement up to higher dimensions or levels of enlightenment, to our ultimate destiny, knowing thyself? Good question in the chat. A research that began when I sought answers to my own personal problems. We are going to be doing this too. I would like to explain. Why do you come up? I don't need you. I would like to explain how I came to revive and adapt this art to a new class of human problems. So, what we are learning is something that was in the past and has been silenced. So we are picking up where we left off as human beings in a cultural tradition. We are picking up where we left off and contributing to the human story, to the human legacy. We're in the great wisdom tradition. Good for all of us. Glad that you can be on this heroic journey with us. Claps for all of us. But as he's saying, he is adapting it as well. So somewhere between Socrates and Plato, this application of this art to human problems was lost. And that can be a fun exploration to see why we have evidence of Socrates acting in this way, but Plato never wrote about it. Okay, so reviving and adapting. So he's also contributing, our author is contributing to this wisdom tradition, to our philosophical or intelligible tradition. And how is he doing it? Applying it not to the realm of ideas, but to human problems. And in doing so, discovering a new class of human problems. That's interesting. Let's keep reading. Right. Someone in chat, Des in chat, posted a video in our Discord channel that everyone's welcome to join. That music theory is really magic theory. Well, magic seems a bit esoteric. Maybe it's dialectic or logos theory. And what we see as mystical and magic, we can make intelligible with our reading together. Primarily, I have had many problems. Wow. Join the club. And I sought some way to get out of them. As a result of my explorations, I found that the root of many of my own problems has been the result of beliefs I didn't know I held. Nevertheless, they had a great power to do what? Deprive me of what I most desired. Interesting. So already he was in the game, was seeking what he most desired. And he recognized that unconscious false beliefs that he didn't know he held deprived him of the power. Well, they had a power to deprive him of what he most desired. I surfaced them. I discovered what maintained them. I saw what factors resolved them. Lucky for us. As a result of these reflections, I generalized the process of exploration into a method for discovery. I have presented these ideas in seminars, lectures, and demonstrations. And of course, if you want some awesome examples of these, I recommend typing in Pierre Grimes' PRS. There's like a series of about 120, I think, lectures that are amazing. So good. Exploring, half of them are on philosophy, half of them are on midwifery or dream analysis. Around, I think they were recorded in the mid-90s. They are great lectures and seminars. PRS. And they're free. And now there are others learning this method, consequently benefiting both themselves and others. He's talking about you.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Yeah, all of those who are not interested in eating a monkey.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Like Joe Rogan says, and instead are learning this method. All of us in this. Good for us. A few years ago, I thought about writing a book about philosophical midwifery so that these ideas could become the common property of others. But I kept postponing writing because of the priority of other projects. So this is us, all of us. Again, one of the fantastic things about the discovering that there is an intelligible or understandable and knowable nature of reality, paradigm, is its common property. You don't have to be in the clique or happen to be born on the right patch of dirt or happen to be born into the right cult or religion or be born with wealth to get into the club. McDonald's can't trademark it and copyright it. It's common property. Anybody can participate in understanding. You don't have to happen to already share the opinion. This is the difference between dialectic and debate. Debates usually have people walking away holding or more entrenched in whatever beliefs or opinions they had to begin with. This is why politics doesn't do anything, because it's all hope and belief. I agree with all my own, all voting is I agree with the opinions that I have. I agree with all my own beliefs. Yeah, no joke. Doesn't make them right though. But the thing about understanding is, doesn't matter what you believe, or how you were raised, or where you were born, or what gender you are. It doesn't matter. Anybody can play. We can all share in the wonder and insight and joy and pleasure of learning. That's why it's recognizing that there's a level beyond belief and opinion, dianoia, understanding is so good. A new paradigm of understanding is so wonderful. And already dissipates so many common problems that we face as a species and as an individual. How do you relate to each other? Do I just parrot my friend's beliefs so I get accepted? Do I just repeat the opinions of the clique so I can be in the cool club? I don't like that. It doesn't feel right. Well, here's something. What about understanding? Everyone can be in that group. There's a joy in coming to understanding together. If you're interested in being accepted in a group, why not have a group bound together in understanding? Notice the word religion is to be bound by a saving belief. What about if we're bound by understanding? Truth. What would that do to our species? What would that do to our conversations over coffee with our friends? What would that do to our learning of music? Anyway, common property. It wasn't until I had a discussion with Dr. Regina Uliana, a psychologist whom I have known for several years, that the need for a validation study of my method came to birth. It began when she asked if the dialogues I engaged in, so these are solving dialogues, keep this in mind, could be an object of scientific study. She reasoned that these philosophical midwifery talks could actually be described as a cognitive psychotherapy. That's a big word. And now that we've read it, cognitive psychotherapy. Cognitive is thinking, psychotherapy, healing the psyche. Now we have a big word. So now we can legitimize what we're doing because we have a big fancy word that's accepted in academic circles. Hooray for us. So it's actually can be described as cognitive psychotherapy. Therefore, we can sit with the cool scientists at the academic table, rather than the philosophical dialogues, rather than philosophical dialogues. Okay, so cognitive psychotherapy rather than philosophical dialogues. Because she has found that many of those who participated in dialogues with me have benefited psychologically. Formerly the goal of psychotherapy. And she thought it would be significant to share this psychotherapeutic method of dialoguing with others in her field. I agreed that many of these dialogues had benefited, but noted that psychotherapy is not alone. Here we go. Psychotherapy is not alone in being psychotherapeutic. The discussion turned on the question of whether it was the psychological or philosophical elements in these talks that produced benefits to the subject. Right. That's cool to see. Which actually helped? Was it the modern behaviorism that, if you've ever done psych at college, talking about giving cheese to rats or, that kind of thing, giving yourself a cookie? Or was it the philosophical, addressing the issues of mind? I'll share a little anecdote. One thing that I noticed is in college, there's first year students just out of high school a lot of them have a very strong interest in psychology and philosophy too. There's a brightness and a motivation to understand the nature of our own psyche or our own relationships, what makes us happy, how do we solve problems. And by second or third year, that joy is gone from their faces. And many drop out and realize it is baloney crap. Why? Well, this is my own experience. The way they talked about helping people or psychotherapy was all to do with treating us as if we were freaking idiots. You are like a stupid rat. Notice how we give the rat cheese, and it will do what we say. Notice how when we ring a bell when we feed a dog, it associates those two things together from its behavioral experience. So if I rung a bell, even if there's no food, the dog will salivate. This kind of crap. And it was really patronizing because I knew I wasn't a dog. And I knew that my reasons for doing things wasn't because of physical stimulus, because I realized I had a mind. I decided to do things based on what was good or not. I had beliefs that made it difficult to do things, even if the physical stimulus was there. It was garbage. So, was it what's in mainstream psychology at the time where I was learning it, which we call behaviorism, or trying to understand the human psyche while taking out the psyche, assuming we're just a physical byproduct responding to physical stimulus, cognitive behavioral therapy? Or was it the philosophical elements, that relating to the psyche, the mind, consciousness, being, self, the various cognitive functions we have, the various levels of reality that we can experience, the dimensions of self that we are awakened to? What actually causes you to do stuff? This question Socrates had himself when he was learning about why things are the way they are. He described his youth, his early teachers, in the Phaedo that we read together. And he realized even those people who talk about mind, they just go quickly straight back into the physical. And so Socrates awakened philosophy in his life by what he calls his second search for causes. What is mind? All this behavioral stuff. The reason why I'm here is because I've got bones and sinews and muscles. Well, hang on a second. If my mind didn't think that it was good for me to sit here, it was best for me to do this, it was just for me to read and share this reading with friends, then these bones and muscles and sinews would be boning and muscling and sinewing their way elsewhere. We'd be boning our way to the pub. Garbage. So this was that's my personal experience, but Here he is saying, was it the psychological or the philosophical elements in these talks that produced the benefit? From my own personal experience, yes. Right, in the chat, your experience of psychology would affirm the creature is real and the mind is false. Was it the psychological or the philosophical that actually benefited people in these talks? The question raised other issues, and she asked what it meant to say, so here's a big question. We like questions in philosophy. That have a question is to be on a quest. So part of this new mature way of relating to our friends and family, well, let's just say friends, is sharing questions, posing questions. Talked about having coffee with Sally, asking a question. He got a question. What does it mean to say philosophy can benefit the subject? And she added to her question, this is what we do in philosophy too, as we're learning together in our channel. Part of being on a quest is holding a question, maintaining a question, polishing a question, adding to it, making it a super question. If the questions are, like if philosophy is the ideal archetype that all other heroes' journeys are reflections of, just like we said, this understanding, if it's the true understanding, the new true paradigm, then you can see it reflected in other areas, as he said, as we just read, see it in other areas of our life, apply it for more mature relationships. Then what about all other examples of development and learning, what we call the hero's journey? Video games where you go on a quest to get better and improve and reach a goal. Movies and film and stories where there's a character going through a process of learning to reach a meaningful goal. If this is the paradigm, the new paradigm, then we can use the lesser video games or stories or movies to mythologize or symbolize or memorize important aspects of the ideal. So this idea here is to have a question and to add to a question might be to use a lesser myth or analogy in a game or a story. The hero has a weapon and then adds to the weapon, adds a fire enchantment to the weapon, polishes it up, gives it a +2 in durability or something. And maintains that question, looks after that question, looks after that weapon, takes it to the blacksmith and adds a fiery enchant to it so it does fire damage. Now this is things that appeal to us and sound good and kind of feel like they're awesome. The reason might be because they are reflections of the true paradigm. So we want to enjoy that, and if we are interested in creation, we might create a game where you can upgrade your weapon. But we want to use it to express what we're learning here in the most important quest that we're on as humans. And so what's that an analogy for? Having a question. Polishing your question, adding to your question, improving your question, cherishing your question, sharing your question might be swinging the blade or something. So this is an example. And so that's a standard thing that we enjoy in philosophy. Getting a question, adding to our question, sharing our question, polishing it up. By the way, to treat a question in that way meets the conditions formally for meditation. It's yours, a koan or mantra given by a guru in some kinds of yogas or spiritual places. A koan has to be yours. So they say, oh, here's a special question. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Don't tell anyone. Or a mantra. Here is the phrase you can repeat, but it's yours. It's only for you. Don't tell anybody. It has to be yours. By the way, this what is the sound of one hand clapping is a question. Keeps you open, keeps you curious. You can't figure it out. Now here's what's interesting about philosophy is it doesn't have to be manufactured. You're naturally curious about solving your own problems. You're naturally open-minded because you realize you're stuck and you don't know. Someone who thinks they've got it all figured out, they can't be open to new insights. So they're not going to meet the conditions for meditation, which is supposed to lead to insight or enlightenment. So what we are seeing is in understanding how to give birth to, nurture, cherish, wonder about, focus on for a sustained amount of time, share it with our friends, we are learning formally what is the archetype that all other meditations and yogas are based on. The natural human yoga, the human meditation. Maybe that's part of the reason why there is benefit that people get when they're in this game. So, an extra benefit for us if that's the case. Now, part of this game is also hypotheses. Not only discovering questions, but creating an if. If this is the case, could it be that we are discovering the archetype or the cause for all other yogas and meditations? When people give secret mantras or koans, questions, or tell you to sit on a mat for an hour so you can keep focused on one thing. Do these all have a same cause? And could it be this? I don't know, but that's okay. You're not supposed to know. You're supposed to have a question about it. So we put our question in our question sack in our inventory. We put our hypothesis in our hypothesis sack. We make more. We build on it. We carry both with us. We need our question sack and our hypothesis sack in our inventory for our quest. In the chat. Right. How do you go to sleep? You are awake. You close your eyes and then you are awake in the dream. Good question. So that's an example of a good question. There's a few in there. There's how do you go to sleep? And a hypothesis. It seems that we are awake. You close your eyes and then you're awake again in your dream. So that's an example. So if as we are on this adventure together, we have a sound drop.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
We share it. So our friend Des in the chat shared a question and shared a hypothesis. And hopefully, if we're good friends, we will ask him how's his question and hypothesis going. Did he gain any insights? Can he add to it? Has he polished up his sword nicely? Has he added a +2 fiery enchant to his question? And in return for us supporting him to carry his question, polish up his question, carry his hypothesis, maybe build more hypothesis, carry a big sack of it, in exchange for us encouraging and supporting him to do that, when he does finally gain an answer to that question, he sparks an insight. When that question is exploded into a million pieces, in exchange for us supporting him, he will come back to us and share his insight, share his understanding, share his experience of something deeper. That's the game. Just like, okay, and then we can mythologize that. Oh, by the way, you're in a party, an adventuring party. I don't know. One member of your party helps you, is a magician, and he can craft water so you can replenish your mana. But in exchange, you you're a blacksmith. You can craft a weapon. So the mage can give water to the warrior can give weapons to the mage. You support each other, that kind of thing. So that's I don't know, I think you can do a better analogy than that, but think of one. That's fun to do. That's called mythologizing. Is there another one we can think of? All right, so Frodo Frodo just is going to carry the ring to help save Middle-earth, but Samuel Gamgees is going to carry Frodo. So when he can't walk, Samuel Gamgees will help by carrying Frodo. And then Frodo in the movie Lord of the Rings will do his one expression and say, "I love you, Samuel Gamgees." So we're supporting each other and sharing our successes. It's not a one-person game. So an example of that is Regina Uliana talking with Dr. Grimes, sharing her question. Right, nice. In the chat. She added to her question by asking which philosophy among the many was the kind I thought really benefited the subject. Good question. Kant's philosophy, Hegel's philosophy, libertarian philosophy, Marxist philosophy. Isn't that how we use the word philosophy? One of many kinds. I reminded her that the philosophy I express is Platonic, and it has little affinity with modern or contemporary philosophy. So all of that other stuff you learn at college, Kant, Hegel, very little to do with Platonic philosophy. It was as important at that time for me to make sure she understood what I meant by philosophy and how it functions in philosophical doctrines. So, define it, number one. How does it demonstrate function in philosophical dialogues? As it is now for me to try and make sure that you, the reader, us, he's talking to us, guys.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Good for us.
Wow.
Make sure that you, the reader, understand the same. Otherwise, it will not be clear that while philosophical midwifery might appear like psychotherapy, it is not. And while it may not appear like philosophy, it is interesting. That should give us a question. Well, hang on a second. If it helps, if it works, how can you say it's not psychotherapy? As a philosopher, I utilize a kind of dialectic adapted from a variety of sources, including the master. So we have somebody who was a master. That's important. It's good to have an image or be aware of someone who has mastered that which we are aiming to master ourselves, so we can benefit from it. A master of philosophical midwifery. Whoops. Who is that? This is our buddy Socrates. Who we've been reading in our other series on this channel. The term philosophical midwifery very often leaves people puzzled because they imagine a midwife of babies who philosophize while delivering babies. Right? So somebody's having a baby and there's a midwife there smoking a pipe and contemplating, what is childbirth really? That's not what it is. Rather than a philosopher delivering men, humans, of their conceptions. So this is our model for what it would be like to be a master, something that we are aiming towards ourselves. Properly naming what I do is an issue I have reflected on for quite some time. And to clarify my reason for naming it in the way I have will require explaining something of my own philosophical quest. So here he goes. We talked about using questing as an analogy, the hero's quest, the hero's journey, questing in video games, questing in popular books and culture like Lord of the Rings. Well, he is also using this quest, holding a question to be on a quest, as a metaphor to talk about his journey. So that's pretty cool. Now, personal anecdote. I have also recognized that, hey, when I share this idea with people have a problem or they want to talk about something that's blocking them from their goals. I say, oh, there's this thing called philosophical midwifery. Oh, that's a dumb name. Makes me think of babies being born. Oh, okay, well, that's just an analogy because Socrates' mum was a midwife, and he used it as a metaphor. But different to midwifing babies, part of the art is to see whether a baby needs to be aborted because can't live in a healthy way or it's sick or something. I don't like that, says many people. Maybe you should give it a different name. So, well, it's not really my choice. Maybe I'll email Socrates' manager and say I've got somebody who doesn't like that babies have abortions. People have abortions sometimes when it's not a healthy baby. I don't see why. It just seems to be normal. If there's a sick baby that can't survive childbirth or can damage the mother. I mean, we know it's historically, culturally right now, it's one of those manufactured distractions that fascists pretend to be interested in to distract people from exploitation. Hey, we are taking everything and enslaving you and taking away your rights and playing this game called capitalism where we get all the money and you do all the work and you can't afford to live. And yeah, but don't think about that. Think about, what about abortions? Maybe Jesus doesn't like abortions. Have you ever thought of that? That hadn't been a religious topic ever until fascist right-wingers introduced it as a distraction. Why all of a sudden do religious people care about that? Oh, because it's manufactured to distract us. So, of course, that's an aside here, but that's the kind of thinking that I get sometimes when I say, hey, by the way, this is what it's called. Why do you call it that? My television said that abortions are bad. All right. Well, I'll send an email to Socrates' manager. My interest in philosophy began as a personal journey, and that personal quest has shaped and determined the direction of my studies. My philosophical background is different from what is, oh, that's interesting, from what is offered at most schools. What we've been talking about today, right? Hooray. If I had undertaken a more traditional route, it is doubtful I would ever have found my way into philosophy. Now, this is important. Often, the conditions to discover this kind of philosophy, the new paradigm, which isn't one philosophy among many or one opinion among many, but truth, the understanding that everyone can join and unite under, true understanding, it's not personal or subjective. Often the conditions to discover that this exists and is so wonderful and is verifiable in your own experiences. The conditions for those often are not being the most popular kid on campus. If you are loved and supported and you do awesome at college and everybody tells you you're amazing and you have a lot of wealth in your family and everything else, then you might not ever discover there's a different way of being. And even if you do, you might, I already get so much greatness. I love my life. I'm killing it in life. I'm already rich and popular and I've got my degree and I've got my way of being and I know how to act like an expert and people will believe me and everything else. So one of the things that Socrates says in the Republic is, often it's the people who fall through the cracks or grow up with a disdain for their whatever religion their family happens to be, or didn't succeed at school or didn't succeed at sport and isn't lavished with praise and everyone, because those are the people that the people will fight to keep you in their tradition. Hey, you're the best Jew. Stay a Jew. We want you. Or you are the best Muslim at sport. Stay a Muslim. We want you in our group. That kind of thing. So, if you have in your life realized that you didn't fit in in the mainstreams of beliefs or culture or schooling, if you didn't succeed in those areas, if you felt a disdain from those things, or if you were even exiled for those things, that could be the absolute best thing that has happened to your soul. Because as Socrates explains in the Republic, often you'll miss the discovery of this. Because those things that have the wealth, they have the power, they have the fame, all of those trappings that can be very alluring, those bright, shiny shapes and colors, are tied to traditional beliefs, systems of power, religious authorities, cultural myths. So if those things are not true, but are enticing and you're trapped in, you might not come across something like this, which says, hey, by the way, there is a way of purifying yourself from your unsuspected false beliefs, finding out where they came from, culture, religion, family, school, so that you can free yourself up to discover the truth of yourself, reach higher stages of being, higher stages of enlightenment, higher stages of thinking that's going to be outside of the scope of those others, but is your purpose and destiny, will lead you into a more mature way of relating to others other than those people screaming you're a heathen, saying you haven't got a degree, you didn't get into Ivy League school, and I'm going to spit at you. All these other ways of being, you might develop a more mature way of relating, you might develop higher states of well-being, as we just read, a greater insight, interest in understanding the mind that you wouldn't have had you, inverted commas, succeeded, confetti, in those other areas. So keep that in mind. From my, I knew Dr. Grimes for 20 years, and I've heard a lot of stories, and yeah, he brilliant person, but because he challenged the official ignorance of colleges and schools and things, and even when he was in the army, the official way of doing things, that because it was terrible, and he achieved great success because he was seeing the truth, he was often chastised or put down or berated or picked on or targeted or excluded. I think he was kicked out. He like a week before getting his before his graduation at St. John's College in America. So keep that in mind for anybody listening who may have experienced that, and don't be disheartened. It could be the best thing that ever happened to you. By the way, our master of midwifery, Socrates, wasn't also the most loved by people in authority and people with wealth. So you might be in good company. Keep that in mind. And add that to your motivation to master this art. Keep in good spirits, keep in good cheer. There may be a greater justice of the whole that is yet to be seen, because we are in that process of going from a part to the whole through this art. So keep that in mind. In a similar vein, if he had gone down that more traditional route, it is doubtful that I would have ever found my way into philosophy. Notice, philosophy, not one of many. Fortunately for me, a friend whom I had met in Italy while serving in the infantry during World War II, gave me a book called The Essence of Hinduism. Its meaning for liberation of the spirit, by Nikhilandanda. A lot of ands in there, like a banana. Nikhilandanda. Which, that book had a profound effect on me. It was as if I had only caught a fleeting glimpse of a beautiful girl. Interesting metaphor. Can we see a significance in that? Why did he pick that analogy to describe his experience? What's the meaning? This is a question. Put it in your question sack. Maybe it'll pay off later. Maybe you have had an experience when reading something about spirituality that feels like a fleeting glimpse of a beautiful girl. What happens when you glimpse a beautiful girl? It's immediate. Suddenly it draws your attention away from whatever you're focusing on, and you can't help it. Because that's what beauty is. Let's keep reading. Put it in our questions. Nevertheless, I instantly fell in love with her. Okay. Let's add that to it as well. Fell in love with her. That woke me up. Woof. Okay, again, we get really happy when the actors say the title of the film and we say yay.
Wow. I don't want to eat a monkey.
Wow.
Okay, awakening philosophy. And I wanted more and was eager to learn about a wisdom that argues that behind the chaos, there was and is a more profound intelligibility. Wow.
Wow.
Somehow I knew in my heart this had to be right, even though I had seen so much of the absurd in my own troubled past and during the war years. Wow.
Wow.
We were just talking about how in our lives, anybody who's watching this, in our own experience, in our own troubled past, we may have experienced being excluded or not fitting in or being chastised or not having the success we wanted in school, in religion, in family, in culture, and sport. Now, that might seem very unfair or absurd that these things happen to you. But we were just talking about that behind that chaos, those apparent unfairnesses, the apparent injustices, the apparent irrationalities, there might be a more profound intelligibility that we might have only had a glimpse of. That those things might have been necessary to lead you into this, as Socrates says in the Republic. Maybe. Well, funny that we were just talking about that, and now our author is talking to us. As Des said in the chat, it's almost as if he's talking to us directly. Repeating what we just said and saying, yeah, it was like that for me too. My own troubled past, the apparent chaos or absurdity or irrationality, it feels like only with catching a fleeting glimpse of something more beautiful and profound, a kind of more beautiful and profound intelligibility underlying everything. If that's the case, that's what we want to see. As we said today, we don't want to send our slaves to the banquet in our place. If there is a more beautiful woman or profound intelligibility and wisdom, we want to see it. We want to eat from that banquet. We want to see that. We want to master the art and see it as a whole. Don't we? Yes. Okay. He got a glimpse into this beauty and intelligibility. By the way, what we are interested in getting through philosophy too. Oh, sure. Thanks. Thanks for the chat. Existential Comics. The guy is awesome. Yeah, I'll check it out. Send a link if you like, or send a link in the Discord. There should be a link to the Discord underneath this. Share it with everyone. Thanks. The legacy of those war years were difficult for each, but for me, the most burning issues in my soul were those situations I encountered during my combat experiences in northern France, where I hadn't done enough. Interesting. Now, those who know Pierre Grimes, he is one of the most decorated war heroes in the Allies fighting against the Nazis in World War II. So interesting that one of the most decorated World War II war heroes we have is talking about how he hadn't done enough. Curious. He hadn't risked enough. He hadn't done enough. He hadn't risked enough. He hadn't taken on a greater responsibility for the outcome of certain crucial battles. Which is amazing because he turned certain crucial battles that helped us defeat the Nazis because of him stepping out from the crowd, or him in his group functioning in profoundly important ways. So despite that, not good enough for this guy. Had I done so, there are several fine and noble men who might have survived the war rather than perished in front of me. Amazing. Those of you who are familiar with the Iliad might know the myth of Achilles, who also was a fantastic warrior, but had a turning point when a loved one perished in front of him in the Battle of Troy in Homer's Iliad. So I don't know if there's a significance in that. It's a question that I've got in my question sack, and I'm sharing it with you guys. While I received several here we go. I was just talking about this, wasn't I? While I received several citations for heroism, the fact remained that I knew in my heart that I could and should have done more. Here is our standard of excellence that we take with us in this game, in philosophy, in order to surface the problems. As we read earlier, the more meaningful I've highlighted everything, haven't I? So it's going to be hard to find. But we read last time, the more meaningful the goal, or the more significant of one's goals, and the more we seek to accomplish it with excellence, even if it's a simple goal, the more it is able to surface some aspect of our pathologos. So here is a decorated war hero saying that in his heart, he knew he could have done more. Wasn't excellence enough for him? He could and should have done more. So this is a standard that we want to carry with us. Whatever we do, can we do more? Can we do it with excellence? Even if it's a simple task, simple goal. And of course, this goal was stopping the Nazis, so pretty profound goal. This already as a 17 or 18-year-old, doing an important goal physically, stopping the fascism and the Nazism, stopping Hitler. Also doing it with excellence, even though he got citations for heroism, he could have done more. And now his friend introduces him to this book which talks about spirituality, the essence of Hinduism, its meaning for liberation of the spirit. So curious journey this person has gone on, already in the physical world, seeking the highest goals, already, well, at least participating in that which is most meaningful for humanity. Stopping them Nazis, not great blokes from what I've heard of them. And also, even though he was a hero, realizing in his heart he could and should have done more. So seeking that with excellence. Now he's been introduced to the essence of Hinduism. So let's say if he takes that character with him into his spiritual quest. Once during the breakthrough from the Anzio beachhead to liberate Rome, World War II buffs might recognize that, I don't know. I was stunned into a strange silence with the realization that here I was playing a role in another act of the European drama that no one understood. Right? Sound familiar? Do we play as unwitting participants in the dramas of our lives and our family tradition and our culture? Are we playing out the same drama in our lives, even though we don't understand how or why it's happening? Maybe. So, the European drama that no one understood or was likely to learn from, right? How are we doing as a culture in the European tradition? Are we learning from our mistakes? Or are we, right now, at the time of this recording, facing a real Nazi threat? Again? Are we still dealing with our relating to each other violently, immaturely, irrationally? Are we still living through unjust systems like fascism and capitalism and exploitation of people, workers, the planet, the animals? Or are we learning from our past mistakes and have we learnt the cause of those negative ways of being, and are we developing something more rational, more beneficial, more harmonious? No, we're not. Hopefully, those watching this in the future will be like, yeah, of course we did. We learned the logos. We learned from this book. We fixed those problems. Duh. Doi, they'll say to us. They'll say, hey, people from the past. Doi. Wake up, people, past people. Doi. And maybe they'll have their own term for us. Hey, 2000s grandpas. Doomers. Not boomers, but not okay boomer, but okay doomer. Because all of us are depressed because we've seen that we are unwitting participants in an irrational, unjust drama that we don't learn from. Hey, doomers, wake up and learn, read the book. So if you're saying that to us, why you whippersnappers, when I was your age, show some respect to your elders, I will say to you in the future. But us right now, yeah, we're still in that game. Right. Still playing out the European drama that no one understands and is learning from. Boo.
What?
It was during a night patrol that we were pursuing the retreating Germans when I realized I was just another warrior going along an ancient road that the Roman legions had also used to pursue the invading barbarians from the north. Just another warrior. An ancient road. I remember hearing this story. He was on patrol with his friend and he was walking down that road and he realized, oh, this is that Roman road, that famous Roman road that the Romans had famously walked along to pursue the invading barbarians. We are going through the same thing again and again and again and again. And his friend said, shh, we're on patrol, man. You don't want them Nazis to hear us. He goes, but don't you know the significance? Humanity is stuck in a loop. Time loop for all you future people. Maybe you have time travel. Maybe you are stuck in a time loop that they don't understand or learn from. Don't you see the significance of what we're doing right now? And his friend went, shut up, Grimes. The Nazis will hear us. So, funny story. Or tragic, depending on your perspective. Depending on what time period you're in and watching this video. Now, I was pursuing another enemy. Oh. So, again, mythology. Look at the examples or the mundane, elevate it to the profound. So this was the stupid or the mundane or the irrational. He is elevating it to the profound. He's not pursuing the Nazis, he's also pursuing my own ignorance. Armed, as it were, so what's his weapon? With this introduction to philosophy. I went on tour of bookshops using Aldous Huxley's perennial philosophy and P.J. Ouspensky's P.D. Ouspensky's Terrenium Organ. Now, some people watching this might be familiar with Aldous Huxley and perennial philosophy. Some people might be familiar with Ouspensky and his Terrenium Organium. If you are, well done. I found Paul Brunton's books and was delighted. Okay, another guy in our lineage. And was delighted to delve more deeply into these profound ideas. I stayed with his Wisdom of the Overself for some many years. My academic education began in 1948 with the 100 Great Books program at St. John's College. We boo them from that story that we just told about getting kicked out right before his graduation. What are you doing? Come on. Kick out Dr. Grimes. What are you, crazy? It's like having Michael Jordan on your team. No. It's like, oh crap, hang on. It's just like, because right now, in time of recording, the Olympics are being played. And the USA Olympic women's team did not include Caitlin Clark, someone who's really, really good and giving a fresh new style of play and making women's basketball in America more interesting for a lot of people, inspiring a lot of people, making people finally interested in it. And they didn't put her on the team, even though she's one of the best players ever. And it's a bit of a joke, but you know, the women's selection team are unwitting participants in problems that they do not understand and they're likely not to learn from. But anyway, so in a similar way, Caitlin Clark was kicked out of the Olympic team or not included. So too, St. John's College didn't embrace Pierre Grimes, which if you're a future person, you will be face palming because hopefully by then the significance of Dr. Grimes will have been made clear. And hopefully for us, at least when we get to the end of the book, if we go back to this introduction, we will laugh mockingly at this college for missing or not seeing the greatness in this person. The Caitlin Clark of his time. That's a silly joke. Okay, forget about that. Pretend I didn't say that. So, St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland. There I delved deeply into the Hellenic period, discovering Plato, hooray, and Plotinus, hooray, and then later reading Spinoza. This has come up in chat recently on my reading list. I haven't gotten into Spinoza myself. But growing a little restless with the direction most of the rest had taken. It seemed obvious that the works we were to study had lost touch with the Hellenic tradition. What do you know? Since both Christianity and various forms of modernism, there we go, two big systems of thought, opinions, ways of thinking, had turned away from contemplating this world as a, okay, here we go, biggie. What did he recognize? This world is a reflection of an intelligible reality.
Wow. I don't want to eat a monkey.
Wow, that's amazing. This young student recognized by reading Plotinus, Plato, and Spinoza that there is a system of thought that we could call the primary or parent philosophy, perennial philosophy, we could call it, that recognizes this physical world that we inhabit, with its ups and downs and injustices and tyrannies and ignorance of dramas that get repeated unconsciously, is itself a kind of reflection of an intelligible reality. Wow, he recognized that and saw that afterwards Christianity and modernism lost the plot, dropped the ball, we might say. Contemplating as well, the spiritual element to this. And then this is what we do in philosophy. We apply the dialectic to understanding the intelligibility of reality, understanding it, knowing it, and seeing that our physical world is a kind of reflection of that, which is why we can see the logos in other things. We can apply it to our beliefs, as he's doing here, to heal ourselves from our ignorance. We can apply it to understanding mathematics and music, as we've been talking about. One of the things I'm hoping to do in this channel is start a series where we build music up from a single note, to see if we can understand music as a whole and see whether or not this same dialectic or new paradigm of understanding is actually reflected in music as an intelligible system. We have music school, we can learn music, so why not see the cause and the paradigm of music itself? So if you're interested, pick up that instrument that you put down as a kid. Here we are talking about picking up what Socrates left off for us, or how Christianity and modernism dropped the ball. They didn't pick up what Plato and Plotinus saw. So too, I encourage you to pick up an instrument that you put down when you were little or younger, or pick up an instrument you've always been curious about getting into, and join us as we do a series where we see if we can build a complete system of understanding of music through a reading of a certain book that was recommended to me by this guy, Dr. Grimes, as perhaps reflecting the logos or the dialectic within that system of understanding. A book that got close to or hit on that. So we're going to use it to understand music, which can be fun, but also as a way of gaining further insight into the most meaningful. How can that help us gain more insight, understanding, and direct experience of self, reality, being, enlightenment, the intelligible reality that is reflected into this world? How can we know reality itself? So, and have fun playing instruments together as well. So that can be fun. Look out for that on this channel. So like and subscribe, follow on Twitch, follow on Discord. You can support on Patreon if you are able to. So that's on the horizon. Lots of fun.
Wow.
So what is that? Seeing even music can be a reflection of this intelligible reality. The world is. Then, while still attending college, I went with some fellow students to talk with L. Ron Hubbard. You know this guy? Tom Cruise's buddy. Tom Cruise is in movies. About this method of studying the mind, which he called Dianetics, which had recently been outlined in a science fiction magazine. Why did he drop that in? Even though these encounters were enjoyable, Hubbard's approach was not sufficiently rooted in any wisdom tradition to meet my needs. Yet, it was not at all clear where I might go to delve deeper into such traditions. So, this guy's like in a way, he's like the Forrest Gump of spirituality. Pierre is. He ran into. I was talking to you about how he met Albert Ellis in New York. If you study psychology, the time of this recording, the models of psychotherapy that you study at college are based on the work of Albert Ellis, cognitive emotive behavioral therapy. And I made that funny voice when I said emotive because in that conversation, he said, I have to put in emotive because the colleges don't like hearing that human problems are intelligible, understandable, solvable. They, for some reason that he can't put his finger on, will thumbs up, fire him or lose his job or his many titles and awards if he doesn't say that, oh, actually, some humans are just emotional and you can't solve problems. So cognitive emotive. Whereas Pierre said, well, wait a minute, what about this? What if it is not cognitive emotive, but simply rational? I can't say that, said Albert Ellis. You can. I'm running away. Now, he had many conversations with many such figures like that. Like we talked about the hero's journey. That's if you do screenwriting or anything that involves creating a narrative, often in school you read the hero of a thousand faces or the hero's journey by a guy named Campbell, I think his name is. Joseph Campbell, I think his name is. And again, he met this guy and said, hey, by the way, you're studying all these myths. Have you read Socrates? This might be the paradigm. And he said, nope, I'm out of here. A similar thing happened with Alan Watts, another key figure in the introduction of Eastern spirituality to the West. So there's a lot of these kind of wild encounters that and that's kind of like Forrest Gump, if you know that movie. He's some guy who happens to run into all of these key figures in history in the crazy life he lived. Well, Dr. Grimes is like that, but for thought or spirituality or understanding. One such encounter was with Ron Hubbard, who we know as the founder of Scientology, who was a science fiction author. They have a lot of money at the moment, and they're very litigious, and they have Tom Cruise on their team. So he's the guy who does the movies. Interesting. So, what did he say of L. Ron Hubbard and Dianetics, the foundation for Scientology? Was in a science fiction book and was not rooted in any wisdom tradition, so didn't meet his needs. So he moved on. He was not at all clear where I might go to delve deeper into such traditions, wisdom traditions. During this period, several of us often discussed where the Platonic and Neoplatonic wisdom tradition had gone, since little, if any, trace of its survival can be found. Where had it gone? Now, I've been talking about reading Socrates. I talk about Socrates because I distinguish Socrates different from Plato for many reasons. Plato wrote the books about his teacher Socrates, and I think there is evidence to show that he was actually recounting actual things Socrates had said. There are certain things that Plato himself didn't seem to be able to write about. There are certain books that seem to not be of Socrates but of Plato's writing. Nevertheless, fantastic mind, fantastic recorder. Maybe not, or definitely not to the level of Socrates, and there are some significances of human history because of that. But I tend to talk about Socrates when I talk about reading Plato. But there are also letters that Plato wrote that you can read. So that would be reading Plato. I think there are a few dialogues that might not be Socrates, that might have been Plato, like the second Alcibiades. But the first Alcibiades, definitely that's a conversation that Socrates had. Nevertheless, we tend to call those dialogues that communicate to us through time, the logos of Socrates, we tend to call that Platonic philosophy because Plato wrote it down. Plato started the academies where they studied it for 1,000 years thereabouts until, as we read earlier, Emperor Justinian shut it down, killed them, banned reading, created the Dark Ages where everything went to mud. Destruction of the classical culture and closing of Plato's academy by the Christian Emperor Justinian in 529 AD. And we say to him, boom. Okay. Tried to take rationality out of humanity. What a big fat smelly jerk. Okay, so we could call the logos communicated by Socrates the Platonic tradition. Now, the word Neoplatonic means some modern scholars try to separate the people after Socrates and Plato, like Plotinus Plotinus here, as different from Socrates, because it's quite obvious in Plotinus's writing that it's a spiritual tradition. So some people like to say, well, Socrates was not spiritual. He just liked to have logical exercises, because that way of teaching Socrates is consistent with the modern way of thinking that is based on the modern and Christian tradition that dropped the ball, as we just read. So they tend to say, well, bringing in the spiritual aspect, the meditative aspect, the experience of higher dimensions of reality, the consciousness, the experiencing the realm of being, adding all that to Plato and Socrates, that's Neoplatonic. That's different. Now, of course, anybody who's been following along with this channel and has actually read the text that these moderns hadn't been able to read because the past translations have been garbage. That might sound mean, but it's also true. Because as we're seeing, having questions, looking for patterns, this is how you solve the puzzle. If it's a perfectly written and worded puzzle with key terms that need to be there, if the translations have mixed those terms around, mixed those patterns around, removed all of the key terms, sometimes give the two different key terms, that is the whole puzzle, the same name, so that's just completely removed all the puzzles, they've turned it into gobbledygook. So that is one of the difficulties that the moderns have had reading Plato and modern scholars and stuff. But thankfully now we have a text, that's what we read with the actual Greek, so we can see the puzzles and actually engage in that dialectic with Socrates in a way that we can benefit from as we're reading. Nevertheless, whether we're not blaming them because they had the bad translations, whether we are blaming them because they haven't reflected on the fact that the modern and Christian tradition literally murdered these dudes, shut down the academy, and tried to replace understanding with absurd belief, as though that wasn't a virtue. Blind obedience to a text you'll never read. That's what will help you. Oh, it created the Dark Ages. Did we learn from that mistake? No. Oh, it created never-ending cycles of war and violence like this guy was living out in World War II. By the way, the Nazis were supported by the Catholic Church. Oh no. Have we learned from that mistake? No. So maybe it's time to wake up and have fun reflecting on the causes of our problems and understanding them and becoming better. It's a lot of fun, guys. And then we encourage people to do that, so we do this gesture. But come on, guys. Have fun. Learn and stuff. Become better. Do philosophy. It's fun. We're all doing it. Come on, guys. And we say,
Come on, man.
come on, man. All right. So those people who want to dismiss the spiritual aspect of Socrates call the spiritual aspect Neoplatonism. Oh, look, I've got a little arrow. How did I get that? It came up on its own. Did I just go like this? Oh. Oh. I don't know, there's a little shortcut I can do to create an arrow. Anyway. So I'm just telling you guys that because, so you know what Neoplatonic means. It's a word that means Socrates plus spirituality. And if you're reading the text, you know that's absurd. There is no such thing as Neoplatonism. It's just a modern word to talk about the spiritual aspect of Plato. That is Plato. That is Socrates, I should say. So, nevertheless, this book is for the mainstream, so we use the word Platonic, even though it's just philosophy. We use the word Neoplatonic, even though Plato is spiritual and Socrates is spiritual. That's the whole point. So so you know what these words mean. He wondered where the Platonic and Neoplatonic wisdom tradition had gone since little, if any, trace of its survival can be found. A difficulty we might be facing that might have drawn you into this channel. About this time, here's our mate, Joseph Campbell. I was just talking about you, buddy. Came out with his exciting book, presenting mythology as a map for man's spiritual journey. Wow, that's been our theme for today. Mythologizing our own spiritual journey. Can help you make, like we talked about, the fact that you slipped through the cracks or you didn't get into becoming an expert banker or a famous whatever might have been the best thing for you. And that idea of needing to feel disillusioned or excluded or expelled from popular systems of belief might be an archetype, which is why Socrates has been talking about it in the Republic. If so, you can mythologize that story. Make a book or a game or a story or a fan fiction. You don't have to make up your own IP. About someone who didn't fit in somewhere and then discovered that only because they didn't fit in somewhere, they were able to discover the true system, the wisdom tradition that would otherwise be unable to be seen because not a trace of its survival can be found. Make it into a myth. Tell it as a story. People might relate to it, as we relate to it 2,500 years after Socrates told us about that very idea in the Republic. So, mythology is important as a way of remembering or communicating the key principles of the hero's journey, the true hero's journey. So this guy, Joseph Campbell, had an exciting book that's kind of standard reading material for any screenwriters or people doing creative writing at school, in college, called Hero with a Thousand Faces. That's the book I was trying to remember. I met with him in New York. Here's our Forrest Gump of spirituality. And during one of our talks about the state of philosophy as a spiritual quest.
Wow.
Philosophy as a spiritual quest. He is Luffy from One Piece. Yes. Right. If you ever get a job writing for One Piece, you can take these elements of Pierre's life, if you like, and introduce them into your writing. Right. Just running into all the guys. Yeah, he is. He's like, yeah, which is interesting because there might be a reason why One Piece is so popular. Anyway, talk to him about the state of philosophy as a spiritual quest. That's what we're on. We are fellow adventurers.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
And we all have the potential to do it. And if you're here, this is in that hero's journey. You can look it up online. One of the stages is a call to adventure. You start off in the everyday world. For us here, it's the physical world or the world of opinions, the world like St. John's, the modern or Christian era. We're all just ignorant foot soldiers in the European drama that no one's learning from. That's the sleeper world. That's the world of being asleep or ignorant. Now, every Harry Potter starts living in his under the staircase. Luke Skywalker starts working as a humble moisture farmer or whatever. But there's a call to adventure. Someone from a different realm comes in and says, hey, by the way, there's a whole new way of being out there. And to you, it might seem that there's no trace of it that can be found. But it's there. And maybe the fact you haven't fit in with the regulars is for a reason. Now, in the hero's journey, which is like a standardized version of, so Joseph realized, oh, hang on a second, there seems to be archetypal or paradigm moments in all of these mythological tales. One of them is this, what he calls the call to adventure. Someone from the new world comes to you and says, there's a new world, join me, or go on that quest, go on that spiritual quest.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Like that. Now, for many of you watching, this is that moment. A great spiritual figure that we're reading about here, Dr. Grimes, who's like Luffy, as it said in chat, from One Piece, or like, who did I just say? Forrest Gump in some way, but Forrest Gump met all these figures, but he was dumber than them. I mean, it was a comedy. Like, he happened to be smarter, but without realizing it because he was a fool. This guy was actually on the ball. So, this is saying, hey, there is a spiritual quest that is difficult to find a trace of because the European drama ignored the roots, dropped their instrument that they had as a kid, dropped the logos of Socrates, and therefore is playing out tragic consequences, the never-ending bloodshed that are bloody pages of human history, because no one learning from it. But there is a different world. There is a world of the spiritual quest of the Platonic wisdom tradition. You might not have heard about it, and we are reading why you haven't heard of it. But it's there. And this is your formal call to adventure. And that's called crossing the threshold in the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell made. Harry Potter and Luke Skywalker, the Star Wars series, Joseph worked closely with George Lucas in creating the Star Wars series. But that's what you read at school. Crossing the threshold. I'm encouraging you to cross the threshold, and I'm pointing to this conversation happening between Dr. Pierre Grimes and you through time, through this text, through this channel, as your call to adventure. So if you're able to receive that, good for you. Hunter x Hunter gone. I love Hunter x Hunter. I haven't watched Bleach. Is it worth getting into? Is it worth going back and picking it up? Ichigo. Cool. During one of our talks about the state of philosophy as a spiritual quest, Mr. Campbell turned to me and said, quite seriously, that the study of spiritual systems, including Plato, just wasn't happening anywhere in the universities. Well, what do you know? Now, hopefully you're a future person watching this and you'll laugh at us. Ha 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 ha. Don't they realize that all learning is remembering? Didn't they read the Phaedo? So it's specifically all learning is a spiritual quest. What were you guys? You stupid doomer boomers. And to you in the future, I say, why you little punks? Don't you say that to me. Why I order? Whoa, give you a knuckle sandwich. And hopefully, and also congratulations that you have picked up the logos and you are living in a much more rational, intelligible, wise world. So good for you. But I don't like your smart mouth. And you'll say, okay, Grandpa. Okay, he was saying it wasn't happening anywhere at the universities like it is now. Like it ain't now. But that a friend of his named, oh, here we go. Speak of the devil, Alan Watts. And I mentioned him earlier. He's one of those figures. Many of us, especially people 30 or 40 years old, especially in the early internet days, let's say that. One of the only introductions to spirituality in the early internet days was from Alan Watts. He was one of the earliest Western academics in the 60s to travel to the East and study Eastern spiritual traditions, studied Zen, Buddhism, and he was a fantastic orator, fantastic talker. So back in the day, early internet days, this was the only idea of spirituality around. It was Alan Watts's talks, and they really resonated. They offered he's pretty much, the essence was, hey, you know how you guys in the West say that there isn't anything spiritual? There's just the physical world, and all spirituality is just religion, which is stupid beliefs that don't make sense. And maybe if you obey the authorities and you feel bad enough about yourself for being a sinner, then maybe you will see something better in heaven, but you don't know. And there's no reason for that. And it seems like it's probably not the case because there are 1,000 different religions that all contradict each other. It seems stupid. But don't worry, there's this other thing called spirituality. Eastern religions ain't like that. One of his great talks was, they think they would see you that is absurd. You don't call yourself Christian or call yourself Jewish or Muslim. That's absurd. Because religion is like a raft you use to cross a river. Once you've crossed the river, you don't take the raft on your back and carry it around with you. So Buddhism, Taoism, Zen, these are methods to cross a river. You don't call yourself Buddhist after and say, that's me, this is my belief system, and I'm going to fight you if you disagree. That's absurd. You don't carry the canoe around with you on your back. That's just going to make your journey difficult. So in the West, we identified with our beliefs because why the hell else would you have a belief? You don't experience anything. Maybe if you die, if you're lucky. It's kind of identity. It gives you a clan identity and a group think. So for a lot of us back then, it's like, wow, there's actually a different way of approaching spirituality. Never knew. And he was a great talker. So Alan Watts, a key figure. And even to this day, even 20 years later, I mention philosophy to someone, they go, oh, I really like Alan Watts because they've heard his talks online. So key figure, one of the early figures, introducing the idea of spirituality to the West. Thankfully now it's way more mainstream. But yeah, key figure, again, like Luffy or Ichigo running into these key characters in the story of Western thought and Western spirituality. From the book, a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into the region of supernatural wonder. This is what I'm feeling. Like there is a sinister, creepy, haunted place outside the normal area that makes it fun and worth going. Right, that's awesome. I don't know why you're saying sinister and creepy and haunted. That doesn't sound like it's fun. Why is it sinister and creepy? The new world is supposed to be, like we've said, it's profound. It's like catching the glimpse of a beautiful girl. There's beauty in it. and you fall in love with it. Hopefully you're falling in love. Oh, you like the haunted feeling. Okay. Horror stories. Ooh, okay, well, whatever works, I suppose. Now that might be an issue if there is indeed this experience called wisdom or nous, and you think it could be an evil spirit or spooky or scary. That might prevent you from going into it 110%. In which case, if you find that to be a belief that's limiting your participation in the realm of intelligibility, in the spiritual realm, then that would be indeed a block that we would explore through philosophical midwifery, should you be open to it. So it may take you reaching that level of learning of this art for you to see it's worth addressing. Otherwise, no, I like it. It's cool. It's fun. It gets me interested. That's great. Until it's not. If you find that it limits your participation, and this is something that happens with people who grew up in like Christian traditions, they might be limited, or they might fear the participation in the mind because they taught that's the devil, or there are evil spirits, or there are demonic entities, all these scary things, in which case it would be absolutely necessary to address those false beliefs, why you believe them, surface them, and have your motivation to experience the true world of being to give you the motivation enough to address those scary false beliefs that were programmed into you at a young age. That's why philosophical midwifery and philosophy itself go hand in hand. So, speaking of Alan Watts, he met him, he had something going in San Francisco, where the Golden State Warriors live, that I should look into. Taking his advice, I moved to San Francisco and spent the next few years studying comparative philosophy with Alan Watts. Hooray. Good for you. Lucky that he met a like-minded friend, because philosophy is not a one-person game. That's why we have this channel, this community. We share our thoughts, we share our reading, we share our insights. We support each other. Fortunately, the great Grimes met Alan Watts at the American Academy of Asian Studies. No, we don't need to. There I had, and why not? We highlighted St. John's, so we might as well highlight the better one. American Academy of Asian Studies. There I had the opportunity to, oh, by the way, yes, good, see it in your dreams. Keep an open mind to what your dreams might be telling you, because your dreams might predict problems that you might face, so you can address them before you have to play them out in real time. So we talked about the potential of false beliefs about the realm of being, devil or spirits that are nasty, getting in the way of your spiritual development. Well, you don't have to be in the middle of a meditative experience or in the middle of a trip and have to experience a terrible, scary trip with demons as a message to say you have a false belief. If your dream is telling you, hey, by the way, you're carrying this false belief, and you pay attention to it, and you apply the art we're learning together to your dreams, you might be able to get ahead of it. Learn the lesson without having to experience or suffer the problems. That's one of the great benefits of this. Well, could be the great benefit, really. At least one of them. So if your dream is saying, hey, there's something that you are enjoying or you think is good or real or true, but might be causing a problem or will cause a problem down the line, pay attention, keep an open mind, apply this art to listening to your dreams, and maybe you'll benefit. Get ahead of that problem. But good for you, hooray, that you are listening to your dreams, looking at it, recording it, and doing your best to unpack the meaning through the dialect with an open mind. If you think you got it all figured out, you ain't gonna learn crap. So that's why we have a question. Keeps you open-minded That's why it's a koan that is given. So, but the thing is, hey, you don't have to suffer the terrible trip or the experience of demons when you're meditating and suffer that. You don't have to experience that to get the question. If you can cultivate a state of curiosity and wonder and intelligibility, then you can find questions everywhere. Seeming coincidences from especially people in this game. Dreams. You're reading. Therefore, you can avoid the suffering. The suffering will give you a big, fat, smelly question that you probably won't ever be able to let go of because it was so traumatic. So beneficial in that way, keeps you open-minded, question-seeking answers. But if you're already developing that curiosity, seeing the value of having questions, realizing that having a question is to be on a quest, and we are all on this spiritual quest we're reading about, you don't have to go through the suffering. You can just be curious about the messages that are coming at each moment. It is entirely possible to verify for yourself that we are part of an intelligible and caring universe. That verification is a kind of proof because it shows you that the mind is constantly communicating for you and for your benefit. We have to be receptive, match it as best we can. To use modern analogies, get on the same wavelength, raise your vibrational frequency. What's that? Well, people who use that language talk about states of mind, openness, curiosity, receptivity, wonder about what's most meaningful. So one way of developing that, questions, openness, wonder, meaning, intelligibility, is dreams. So every single night, you get a bunch of things to cultivate that higher vibrational frequency towards, which might get ahead of having to live it out traumatically or through suffering or through pain. So keep that in mind as we go. So he went with Alan Watts to do comparative philosophy at the American Academy of Asian Studies. There I had an opportunity to study Tibetan philosophy with a Lama. That is curious. Now, I haven't been to a university like that, but I have heard of universities where you can, they're very wise, intelligent animals, like a llama. So he found a spiritual llama. I think this is what's mythologized in Disney movies. And then he goes next door to study Chinese philosophy with a chicken. And then he does potions with an elephant. Okay, so opportunity to study Tibetan philosophy with Lama Tata, and Chinese philosophy with Jiming Shen, and Hindu philosophy with Haridas Chaudhry, and had the good fortune of getting to know these men while studying with them. Now, of course, Lama Tata isn't a llama, he is a person. Lama is a title. And I think, well, I'm not sure if it was Lama Tata, but one of the people who Pierre studied under was the spiritual teacher of the Dalai Lama. That's a cool thing to have on your CV. It might have been Lama Tata, I'm not sure. Chinese philosophy with Jiming Shen, I've heard this name before too. Whoops. Hindu philosophy. What's he doing? Hindu philosophy with Haridas Chaudhry. Those who are coming to the channel through the Hindu spiritual tradition, you might know this guy, Haridas Chaudhry. If you do, share your insights or your experiences or your questions about this guy in the chat, in the comments, and Discord, please. Likewise, those more familiar with Tibetan philosophy and have some ideas or thoughts about Lama Tada, or those from Chinese philosophy, if you know about Jiming Shin, please share your experiences, your insights, your benefits that you gain from these people. Again, we're on an adventure together. We're in a party of adventurers. And I've lost my sound effects. What the hell? Normally when I talk about being in a party of adventurers, I say,
You're a wizard, Harry.
and then I say,
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
and sometimes I say,
Sneaky little hobbitses.
but not now, because we are on a quest. Interesting. So, again, meeting some big names in different areas. So, like in an anime, this might be meeting the greatest swordsman in the world, and then meeting the greatest doctor in the world, and then meeting the greatest chef in the world, and saying, "Hey, why don't you all join me on a quest to find the One Piece?" So this guy had me. How cool is this? It's pretty cool. Had a good fortune of getting to know these men while studying with them. After receiving a fellowship from the academy, I was appointed lecturer in comparative philosophy. Wow.
Wow.
So we're learning a lot about the author of this, and huge storied background, big names, like running into these big figures, having the most extreme conditions in war, even though being a war hero. This is kind of like a Luffy, like an anime story. Like, he was still a war hero. Like, we want Goku or Luffy or Gon in Hunter x Hunter to be excellent, but also he still had character development. He wasn't excellent enough. He wasn't the king of the pirates. He wasn't the strongest Saiyan. He wasn't the number one whatever hunter. In other words, he still had a character arc to go through. Even though he was fantastic, he wasn't what he really wanted. He knew in his heart he could be better. As every anime I've ever seen has a character like that's the hero mainly. Not everyone, but almost. It's almost like he's archetypal in that way. And then he had his call to the new world. Can you take that level of integrity, that level of excellence, that strange character of soul? Maybe he lived some fantastic previous lives to be that character. And thankfully for us, because without him, we might not have defeated the Nazis. From what I've heard of his experiences in World War II, him and his troop, Texans, I think, group of Texans, along with him from Brooklyn, turned, I think, 3 major battles against the Nazis. So thankfully we have him, gift for humanity, I guess, for all of us non-Nazis. But called into the new world with these books, The Essence of Hinduism, and then later the Perennial Philosophy, and Opensky's Tyrannium Organum, and the book Wisdom of the Overself. So these were his calls to take this level of character to the new world. Like, hey, Luffy, you're a great whatever you are. You could be a great pirate. That kind of thing. You know how animes work. You know how not just animes, all stories work. And now in that quest, he's running into the big names. He's running into, like on One Piece, the master swordsman, a master chef, a master navigator, and he's benefiting from his relationship with them. So we are getting quite an awesome story of somebody who has not only mastered this art, but has rediscovered it, applied it to something that it wasn't applied to, beliefs, and has shared it with us, and maybe gives us what we need to solve our problems of the soul so we can reach our highest goals, fulfill our purpose as human beings, reach our highest stages of enlightenment in this life and beyond, but also maybe even share it with humanity so humanity can overcome its problem that we are reading about here, the being an unwitting soldier blindly walking into the same problems. It's been repeated endlessly without understanding and without learning. Maybe we can remedy that, fix the human society, save the human race from its inevitable destruction if it continues to walk this path. Because hey, he walked that path against the Nazis that had been walked many, many times before, including by the Romans. Now we walk that path with nuclear weapons. So, don't have time to keep being ignorant. Maybe we can share this with humanity, learn what we need to solve problems within our species, but most importantly for ourselves. So, that's where we're headed, and that's the stakes. So I hope you find that inspiring. I hope you find the story of the author, someone who did master that, rediscover it, and has adapted it to what we most urgently need. And I hope you are interested in sharing the wonder with your fellow adventurers.
I'm looking for someone to share in
You're a wizard, Harry.
adventure.
On that note, let's see where he goes from there next time. Thank you for joining me on Twitch and on YouTube. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and your links in the chat. Feel free to join the Discord. There should be a link below. You can follow along on Twitch, get notifications when I'm going live. You can like and subscribe on YouTube if you like. You can support on Patreon if you think this is something worth supporting in any way you can. And hopefully soon we'll get into other explorations of the Logos, like in music. That's something on the horizon. But we are doing this channel along with the reading of Socrates to see the same dialectic applied to the higher ideas, the ideas of being, the very spiritual tradition that we are reading, he is hunting for. He recognized, hey, in his St. John's College, the 100 great books, they started with Plato and Proclus, but then they dropped the ball. Well, he is on the hunt for where it's happening. At the moment in our story, he's with Alan Watts in the Academy of Asian Studies, and he's meeting with these other spiritual dudes. Does he find it? Does he rediscover Socrates? What does he do? Let's find out next time with that cliffhanger. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Stay curious, folks. No, that was lame sign off. Follow the logo. No, I won't say follow the logos. Discover questions. Stay curious. I don't know. I'll think of a clever sign off next time. Something to look forward to.